Rubin, as Brian had said, and then of course Chef Cwierz, and I'll let you know right in your presentation. It was really an eye-opening experience to see them compete, and it was really fun to see. So we're going to see Chris do that again in July.
Thank you. Welcome everybody. We're chefs, we're not speakers, so we're going to do our best, right? So who here has competed before?
No.
A couple? Who wants to compete? Who wants to compete? All right, well, hopefully we're going to give you some helpful tips to help you win a competition, prepare for a competition, and we're going to give you some of the reasons why we compete, and you know, what it does for you personally and for your career as well. So we're going to go through a slideshow, and then we're going to talk a little bit about each point, and then we're going to open up for questions. And if anybody has any questions in the middle too, just raise your hand and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have. All right, so why do we compete? I'm up first. Because it pushes us to become better. So anytime you compete, you always want to do better than you did last time. You obviously want to beat the other competitors, but you also want to do better from what you did the time before. That's what it's all about. It's about growing, about getting better. Make a name for ourselves. You know, you win a competition, it goes a long way in the media, which helps you get jobs in the future. It helps you get girls if you want. Or just kidding about that. Opportunity, just an opportunity to grow and to learn new things and to push yourself. Discipline. To do a competition, you have to discipline yourself. You can't just show up, you know, like I did for this speech and just kind of wing it. You got to really plan, and you got to know what you're going to do ahead of time. It helps you to raise the standards of culinary excellence, and that's actually a quote that I took from the ACF, and that's you know, their credo for competitions in the ACF. Hone your craft. Hopefully you're doing new things, and we'll talk about it later, but when you do a competition, you should definitely do stuff that you're familiar with, but also throw in some stuff that helps you grow. You know, do a couple new things, throw a couple new things in there too. Learn from other chefs and yourself. So when you go to a competition, you see so many different things. Even the people you're not competing against, there'll be other people, other different competitions. So you'll learn from that, see what other people are doing, and then you also learn from yourself, you know, by trying new things. Build camaraderie, also very important. It's very important when you go to a competition that you get to know your competitors, you get to be friendly with your competitors. When we competed at the regional competition, there was another Chef of the Year competitor who was, to be frank, was a complete asshole. Nobody could stand it. He didn't show up to the judges' meeting. He showed up late to all the other events, and then when we tried to, you know, myself and the other two competitors, we had gotten to know each other. We were friendly. We were already hanging out. You know, because we're there for the same thing. You know, we're there to beat each other, but we're also, you know, there as brothers and sisters, really. And he just snubbed his nose to all of us. Chris, at the end of the competition, he had a handful of stuff, and the guy like ran right in front of him and walked out the door. Didn't hold the door for him. I was washing dishes, and the guy like pushed my dish thing out of the way and pushed his thing. And I mean, that kind of stuff. You know, you'll never get invited back to another competition. You act like that. And karma's a bitch too. So the nicer you are, the more the judges are going to respect you, the more the other competitors will respect you, and the more chances you have to make it to other competitions and to do good. And also, it's just the right thing to do. Why else do we compete? Cash prizes. You know, ACS competitions are great. You know, you get medals. You know, you can work toward your certification, but there's also competitions where you can earn cash.
Like what kind would that be, Chef?
Excuse me?
Like what kind would that be?
Let's see. Custom Culinary has a great competition. No, actually, I've done quite a few competitions throughout the years for cash. I've done the Idaho potato competition. Let's see, Ocean Garden Shrimp. Done minors many times, and a bunch of other ones too. So you can definitely win some money too. And then credit for certification. You know, with medals, you get points towards certification. And also, you don't have to take the practical test if you get a silver or above in a mystery box competition.
So one of the things that's really important when you decide that you want to do a competition is committing to the competition, right? So it's always great if you go, oh yeah, that'll be fun to do, right? And you say, oh, I'm gonna practice, and then work gets in the way, your family life gets in the way, school gets in the way, you get in your way, and then it's 3 days before your competition and you go, crap, I really need to get serious about this, right? It's really important to kind of do some research on your location. A lot of times with competitions, you may know the location ahead of time, and you may have been there previously, or you may not have been there previously. When we competed at the regional competition, I had never even been to Oakland, not a destination that I probably would travel to again. But we ended up having a great time, and we found a lot of really cool cultural things close to our hotel. But we didn't know anything about the school. So we looked online, and pictures online are one thing. When you get there, completely different, right? So we didn't know what the expectation was gonna be as far as a kitchen. Because in the rules, basically it was described, and I perceived it, and you can interject if you read something different, but I envisioned having a 6-foot table, 2 outlets, and that was it. And a trash can maybe at the end. When we got there, we actually had a pretty decent setup. I mean, the kitchen space was small. It was probably from the end of this toolbox here and maybe back to that table. It was kind of tight, but if you organized yourself, you could be successful in that space. So there was a sink, there was a 2-compartment sink, there was a broiler, there was a salamander, 6-burner range with oven below. What was that? What else? There was 4 outlets.
And a refrigerator.
And a 2-door refrigerator underneath the counter, and a fryer.
Yeah, it was actually amazing. It was probably the best setup you could ever have.
Yeah, so there was literally everything that you could. So when we got there and we did the little walkthrough with the judges, we were like, we both kind of, it was like Christmas, right? We're like, ooh, we get a sink, right? Like, big thing, right? And then the refrigerator was a bonus because we had coolers, and it's quite interesting. And I don't know if did you expect something different than what we
had?
had?
A lot of competitions I've done where you don't know the setup. I've had times where I've had to run all the way across the room this long to get to the sink to wash stuff, and you got to go like 10 times. And you got to share refrigeration space, you got to share ovens, and we had all our own stuff. So, it depends. You don't know what you're going to get, but you should describe how you trained for this, because he trained in like 5 different kinds of kitchens. He trained in a food truck. Amazing.
So part of this is, also researching your competitors. So you don't want to go into a competition and think that you're the best, right? If you think that, that's great. That's a great self-confidence, and you need that to compete. But if you go in and don't know who you're competing against, how are you really going to know how you're going to win? You need to have a plan from the beginning. Also, if you can look at who your judges are going to be, that's also going to be a great indicator as to what they're looking for and how you can suffice maybe getting their attention and maybe captivating them with a new technique or a new trend along the way as well. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So anyway, back to researching your judges. It's very important. I've been doing competitions since, since a lot of you before you were born, probably 1987.
He was 5.
First one. 1987, first one. But I always try to find out who the judges are and do a little research and see. So like if Walter Leibel's a judge, you can go 2 different ways. It can either kill you or help you. You can do a dish that has braised red cabbage, which is something from where he's from. Something that his mom probably made for him. So either you do it awesome and you do it traditional, or you don't do it at all. Because if you do it and if it's crap, you're gonna lose points. If you do it incredible, you're gonna get favor with the judges because you're bringing back some memories for them. You're giving them something that they like, that they understand. And a lot of times you're gonna get different judges. You're gonna get younger judges. You're gonna get older judges. So you gotta know who your audience is, and you gotta kind of blend it together. So it's very, very important to know who the judges are, because one judge will judge something one way, another judge can be totally opposite.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a good example of that was the Robert Blaine Culinary Salon that we did in January at EVIT. We both competed in that as well, and it was a mystery basket challenge that we both were like, yeah, we're gonna do it, totally, right? So myself, another pastry chef who's actually a colleague of mine from the San Diego Art Institute, we competed together kind of in the same kitchen space. So we go into it and we get a mystery basket, right? So how do you prepare for a mystery basket challenge necessarily? There's not a lot that you can really do, right? But it's always a good idea to kind of come in with a game plan, right? So if you have something that doesn't have a lot of flavor, maybe something like a custard, you can infuse flavor into it very easily, right? If you have something chocolate, pairing chocolate with it, I'm talking from pastry because that's my background. Chocolate can pair with many different things, but you have to be creative in that flavor profile on how you can balance those flavors together to work together. We were both thrown quite the curveball because in my mind, you know, like you get a plan together and you think, okay, this is what I'm going to do. You get tunneled, right? So I thought I was going to get 3 ingredients because really, how many ingredients can they throw at me as a pastry chef? I'm going to be awesome no matter what, right? Wrong. I got 5 ingredients, and 5 ingredients sounds like no big deal, right? Well, and you had how many? 20 in your basket? Yeah. So we had some of the same crossover ones, but I did a modified version of my category, which was building a showpiece out of sugar and doing a plated dessert. So I had 4 hours to complete it. My mystery ingredients all had to be in one dessert. So typically it's 2 desserts and then an entremet is the category as it reads, but if I did the modified, which is what I did 1 dessert and a showpiece. So I had to do 5 ingredients in 1 dessert. Here are the ingredients in my basket, okay? Lavender, dried lavender, wasn't worried about it. Pink peppercorns, okay, aromatic, I can use it, right? Cocoa nibs, pastry, hello, that's not too hard, right? I had 6 ingredients, I'm sorry. Here's my other 3. Goat cheese, okay, getting a little more complex. Tamarind pods. Fennel, tomatoes, I think I actually had 8, I had 8 ingredients. And as I keep going, I have more and more. Guajillo, dried guajillo chilies. So all that in 1 dessert. So as soon as I saw the basket, my immediate thought was, I quit. This is not for me. How can I be successful? And then I thought, maybe I'll do some like bonbons and put it into my showpiece and it'll count because it's all together, right? So I asked the judges, can I make some chocolates? And they said, no, everything has to be in the dessert. And I'm like, okay. So then I kind of thought, okay, I got this, right? So I saw my competitor across the way putting things together and he's like, chef, did you get fennel? And I'm like, oh yeah. And he's like, what the hell do we do with it? And I'm like, I don't know. But I made it work. Somehow I put a dessert together with that. So I ended up doing a goat cheese panna cotta that I infused the lavender in. I did a chocolate Parisian macaron that I did a honey ganache with the guajillo chilies and the tamarind pod that I infused in the cream. And then I did a cocoa nib tuile and an orange caramel pink peppercorn sauce. And then I did an orange, tomato, and fennel jam that went along with the panna cotta. I'm like, they're gonna eat me up. I'm not gonna even take a medal, right? But I thought, at least I put a dessert together, right? And the time went so fast, I think I spent more time freaking out about the ingredients than I did focusing. And then we got the judges' critiques, and my critique was, do you remember what he said? Good job. This panna cotta was fantastic. And I'm like, did you taste it? How can those flavors be good, right? And they're like, no, it was good. And somehow I ended up with a silver medal. And I thought, you know, I'm not asking questions. Take my medal, and I'll see you. Thank you very much, right? It was a learning experience for sure, but was it my best competition? No. But I think it certainly prepared myself and you for the regional competition that we did. So it's good to kind of get in that mindset of, okay, they're watching me, right? But you can't kind of drift out and watch what other people are doing, because there was a lot of people watching, and as Madonna said, she was one of the people kind of taking pictures and watching us, and it can be nerve-wracking watching somebody compete. You watch it on TV a lot of times, right, on the Food Network, and you think, oh, geez, just put it in there, oh, the time's going, right? But as you're competing, you're not looking at the clock. And even though people are watching you, if you stop and look up, that's time that you lose. That's precious time that you lose. So I vowed when I started competing, and I was lucky, because I was in the very front kitchen that didn't have a wall. So everybody's leaning on the counter, watching me, taking pictures. I had like nowhere to go. And I had to run through all these people to go to the freezer to get my ice cream so I could plate. And I had to run back and forth a couple times with the ice cream. So you gotta allow for inconsistencies in a kitchen. That's why we kind of talk about how the setup's gonna be. And then getting your equipment there. So you practice, right? Obviously you practice. So you practice, and you think you're good, right? So then you start packing and you think, okay, I'm flying Southwest, no big deal. I don't have to pay any baggage fees, right? And then you start packing, and you realize you have 20 large carry-ons. How are you gonna manage that by yourself? You're not going to, right? What can you reduce? We didn't fly. We actually decided to do the traditional mode of transportation, which is renting an RV and driving from Phoenix to Oakland. A short 16-hour drive, it was. And when we filled the gas tank up, it was approximately $170 every time.
Not cheap.
But we had every piece of equipment known to a chef or any aspiring chef in that RV. We planned for the unknown, right? So, you want to talk about that?
Oh, wow.
Toolbox.
Yeah.
Or you want?
Well, we'll talk about that in the
Okay.
first section.
So this toolbox was one of the things that we took, but we literally had, it was a mid-sized RV, right? But we literally had so much equipment in there. I mean, I brought an oven, an ice cream machine, a KitchenAid, a cooler full of food, a burner, pots and pans, bowls, knives, you name it, I had it. So when I get there and I realize there's an oven, I didn't have to pack an oven, right? They didn't have an ice cream machine. But I used my own oven because you know why? How many times whenever you use another oven is it different? We talked about this morning with the, what was it again? Game hens. And they're being raw, right? Because you weren't familiar with how the oven works. So important that you know how the mechanics are working. And unfortunately, you don't have time to go in and put something in the oven for 10 minutes and kind of test if the temperature is right or not, right? You get a 10-minute window typically with an ACF competition to set up, and then your time starts. So if you want to make sure that the oven's at that temp, that's something that you might want to incorporate in the beginning when you're getting your mise en place kind of together, or you're mixing, or something of that nature. Yeah, so getting things there is really challenging sometimes. So like when I'm going to Kansas City in July, I'm really freaked out because my ice cream machine that I had was a very heavy ice cream machine. It was about 18 pounds. I just bought one that actually weighs 6 pounds, so far lighter, and more easy for me to kind of get on the plane and off the plane a little easier. But it's going to be a challenge trying to kind of streamline things. Luckily, I have some contacts in Kansas City, and I've already put like an APB out. Like I'm going to need a speed rack, I'm going to need sheet pans, you know, things that I know I don't need to bring, and then the things I absolutely have to bring. And then along those lines, what can you bring? Reading the rules is really imperative because a lot of times it'll say what you can bring and what you cannot bring. So as simple as that sounds, a lot of times there's gray areas, and we like gray areas if they work in our favor. So you want to be clear on how things are written, and if you're unclear, ask. Because if you don't know, you don't want to be dinged for that.
So anyway, as far as what you can bring, it's changed a lot over the years. When I first started doing competitions, I did mostly mystery box competitions. And in the old days, you can bring everything. I used to have 3 steamer trunks that I would fill full of equipment. It would be stacked up to here. And everybody would be like, whoa, what's all that stuff? And I had every single thing you could think of, because you never know what you're going to get in a mystery box. But it worked out okay. Now, for the mystery box, you can bring your knives, and that's about it. You can't bring anything. So that way it's an even playing field for everybody. The host center is supposed to provide pots, pans, plates, everything. But you used to have to bring your own plates, bring your own equipment, your pots, pans, everything. If you do a cake competition, which is what you usually do at the regionals, and a lot of is actually the more popular competition these days because they don't seem to have as many mystery box competitions anymore for one reason or another. A lot of people don't do them. But you can bring what you need. You actually have to bring what you need to cook your dish. You have to bring your own plates. You have to bring your own pots and pans. So it depends on the competition you're doing. And if you're going to do a competition, you need to print this out. It's the ACF Culinary Competition Manual, and it basically gives you all the details, rules, what you can bring, what you can't bring. And then to go back to the mystery box competition, you can prepare ahead of time a little bit. You can, like I always do, when I go in, I have my dessert already done. No matter what the mystery box components are, you have your base for your dessert. Because usually it's a 4-course thing with a dessert as part of it. And it has ingredients that are like in a pantry. So if they have cornmeal, maybe you think of some dishes that you can make polenta with or things like that. So you got to study your manual, what they have to have in the pantry, and then you can get a base for your menu so you don't have to make up the whole thing on the spot. And I don't know if you guys can tell who the culinary instructor is and who isn't, but I'd be that guy.
And I want to just throw a couple cherries on top. This little wagon thing he's got here, in the 90s when Lenard competed, when I competed against him once or twice, he actually had a big giant roll weight. And you ever see like Rolling Stone on their speakers where it says Rolling Stones? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. His thing used to say Rubin on all this stuff. And it had pots and pans. It was like a war wagon. So you're competing, and I have like my stuff in a Lexan Cambro, and he comes rolling in. It looks like the Grateful Dead. And that alone was the intimidation factor back in the day. But he even taught me back then, even though we were competing, when I asked him about mystery baskets, and he just touched on it, but he always used to do a flourless chocolate cake. That was his can one, but he had a perfect flourless chocolate cake that's in that pantry thing. So he only had to worry about 3 courses. He didn't have to worry about the 4th course because he had that down. That was done in 5-minute meal. So I just want to add a couple cherries on that.
That's true. And I bring this to all the competitions I go to, and I have everything in here. I got my gloves, got a timer, very important first aid kit because you never know when you're going to need it. You could cut yourself and you'd be bleeding all over the place. If you don't have anything to sew it up, you're done pretty much. And then I usually have all my pots and pans, everything, all knives. And then these are, it's kind of dumb, but these are little, magic trick. Little sheet pans that fit in little ovens.
That's a nice display, Chef.
Thank you. But to get organized and to do a competition, these have saved my life a million times, believe it or not. Yes.
Do you have a coach or does someone mentor the team or?
We're actually going to talk about that a little in the next slide, I believe.
Next slide, yes.
But yes.
Okay. Yes and no. But anyway, what I was trying to get at is this thing is something that I've had for 20 years. I bring it to every competition. You can use it as a separate table. And just because you walk into a competition, you got a table here and a table there, I always try to reconfigure my whole workstation to make it work for me. And judges are usually, sometimes judges are like, what are you doing, moving stuff? But most of the time they're like, oh, that's cool. He knows where he wants to be and what he wants to do. So that's something you got to do. You got to feel comfortable in your space when you're cooking. And this is like another arm for me, basically, because I got all my equipment. I could put another cutting board on top, so I got a place to cut here, a place to do that there. So you just got to think what you need to succeed. Just have that little extra bit. All right. So read the rules. Basically, I said, before you got to print this out, you got to read it really, really carefully. Read it, reread it, because some things, the obvious things are not always obvious. But you could definitely lose points by not following the directions. I know the competition that we did. Anyway, the mystery box competition. They said you can't bring any stuff. It was the first competition I'd done in a long time where I couldn't bring all my stuff, so I was like, I felt naked almost. But we got there, and there was a couple of people that brought stuff that they shouldn't have brought. and they almost got disqualified for that. So you just got to be careful that you follow directions, because it could cost you. You could plan for months and months, and then you get there and it's all over before you can start.
Reading the rules, it seems very simple, but if you read them at least 3 different times, I can guarantee you each time you read them, you'll find something new each time, or you'll go, wait a minute, that reads differently. And punctuation, I always stress this as an instructor, how important punctuation is. If there's not a comma, then it could read very differently than if there is a comma. And that actually happened to me in the Mystery Basket Challenge, because the way that I read it, in the modified category that I did, was it was a plated dessert or a showpiece. So it wasn't comma, or it was comma or a showpiece. What they had told me, I presented everything in my window, and then they came back and said to me, you're missing your entremet. And I said, what? No. And I looked at it again and I said, I read it, and I read, the comma, pause, the rest of it. And they said, well, no, it means an entremet, a dessert, and a showpiece. So I had that moment of, well, I'm going to be disqualified. I'm angry. I'm upset with myself. And then I thought, no, the writing is incorrect. It leads you to believe something different. So the judges, without me saying anything to them, read the rules again, and then said, it reads exactly like you said. It was our mistake. And then they judged me based on what I did. But that was a really good kind of learning experience for me. And then have somebody read it to you. Because if you read it consistently 3 times, you're going to read the same thing. So read it once, put it away, come back to it a day later, read it again. Then have somebody else read it to you. You'll hear something different, I guarantee you. And then ask questions prior to the competition. Typically your judges are going to meet with you, and they'll do, bless you, they'll do a kind of tour with you through the kitchen, or they'll show you your space, and then you'll be sequestered until your times begin. And then typically they'll say, what you have to say, and they'll say, does anyone have any questions? That's your opportunity. If you come up with something last minute, for instance, whenever we did the regional competition, I was doing a sugar garnish, and I wanted marble so I could cool the sugar very quickly, because I had an hour to put a plate of dessert together. Well, an hour's not a lot of time to bake something, and it was a warm dessert. So I had sorbet, I had streusel, I had a cake, I had a lot going on. I sprayed the plate with cocoa butter, and I had a sugar garnish on there. So I asked, because in the rules it says marble will be provided for you. Well, when we did the tour of the kitchen, there was no marble anywhere. So I just simply said, will there be marble tomorrow? And they said, oh, if you need it. And I said, yeah, I do need it. And it's also a good way to kind of psych out your competitors, because even if you're not using marble, they're looking at you and going, what's he using marble for, right?
So this is the fun part, planning. So planning accordingly. So, I touched on it briefly before. For a mystery box competition, you want to read the rules. You want to find out what's in your pantry. And you want to start planning your menu ahead of time. Even though you're going to have mystery ingredients, you want to try to have a framework for your menu. For a cake competition, you have usually it's a choice of duck, chicken, or quail, I think. And then lobster, there's a lamb one, there's a bunch of different ones. And you have to come up with one dish that you can do in an hour. And believe me, an hour goes by pretty fast. So what I usually do is I make it too complicated, and I end up going overtime. But what you got to do is you got to come up with a dish that you can do in an hour. That's the important thing. And you got to practice a lot. So preparing a timeline. So you have your timeline already. The rules tell you what your timeline is. So you have to prepare a dish that you can do in that timeline. Professionalism. Basically you gotta plan to show up and be professional. Practice, very important. Lewis asked me about mentors, people that help me practice and do stuff like that. Walter Leibel, our master chef here in town, has been a mentor to me for 25 years at least, I'd say. And whenever I do a competition, I always go to him, I bring my recipe to him, I say, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And he'll help me tweak it a little bit, he'll give me some advice. But the one thing that he always tells me that I hardly ever listen to him, and which I wish I do, is practice. And he always tells me to practice a dish at least 10 times. And usually, busy kitchen, busy all the time, family, all this, I'll practice it once, maybe twice at the most. But you know what, he's so right. You got to practice it 10 times, because then you know for sure you can get it done in time. And then, you do it enough ahead of time, a month ahead of time, so you can change your recipe if you need to change it. You don't want to be changing things the day before you go for a competition. Unfamiliar kitchens, I'll let him talk about it, because he practices some very unfamiliar kitchens, because then you can be prepared for anything.
So my very first competition was actually an international competition. I did the Culinary Olympics with Chef Leibel. And he came to me and said, we need somebody on the team. You want to do it? And I said, yeah, like, what a great opportunity, right? And then we started practicing. The big, I think, disconnect with our team that competed together was we were all in different areas. So we had 2 people from the team in San Diego, we had somebody in Houston, we had somebody in Atlanta, and then both of us in Phoenix. We practiced once together. Everything else was done separately, photographs, and we would do conference calls on Sundays. Well, unless you actually are touching and seeing and tasting the food, it becomes a very big disconnect, and that was a big learning experience for me in that particular competition. But when I competed, or when I practiced for the regional competition, I took some advice from a colleague of mine, and she said, make sure that you practice in a bunch of different locations, because you never want to get too comfortable in the same environment. And I think that's a really good point to bring up, because many times we have this kind of tunnel vision that we focus in on what we're doing, and we have everything at an arm's reach, right? So I would purposely put utensils in the other room when I was practicing at my house. And I do not have a chef's kitchen at my house by any means. I live in a house that was built in 1927, and the kitchen is original to the home, okay? But I would literally put a whisk on one side of the house, and I would put my spatula somewhere else. So I had to run more time, right? But I wanted to prepare myself to see what kind of time I was getting. So I was able to get through everything. I practiced in a food truck. It's kind of odd, but I brought everything that I had. I brought my ice cream machine, I brought my oven, I brought my mixer, because it was all stuff I was bringing to the competition anyway. So I figured, if I have electricity and I have a freezer, I should be able to do it, right? Well, it was a learning experience, and I think it really helped prepare me to adapt to whatever was kind of thrown at me. So the kitchens that we were in, it was so hot and so humid in there. I was so lucky that I didn't do chocolate, because tempering would have been challenging. In the last minute, I kind of looked at the weather forecast, and I was going to do sugar with pineapple juice, because I was doing a tropical dessert. And then the last minute, I changed it to isomalt so that it wouldn't kind of weep and collect that humidity very quickly. And I'm glad that I did, because my sugar was still standing when it went out to the electric. So I think it's really important. And then packing is a big part of that. We talked a little bit about that, but it's always a good idea to do that a week before, create an inventory list, and go through it. And then unpack everything and make sure that you actually have everything. Because a lot of times we go, mental check, yeah, have it, right? How many times whenever you travel somewhere, you get there and you go, oh man, I forgot my toothbrush, right? Or, oh, I forgot toothpaste. Well, that's kind of imperative to brush your teeth, right?
I packed and unpacked like 10 times. I packed my dish, because we had to bring all the food for our dish. And this is the prep list for what I did. And basically I broke it all down, I numbered everything, I had boxes for each item, and then each one had a number so I could count down and make sure I had everything. I had 1,000 things, and then when I got there I realized I forgot my work shoes. But luckily my regular shoes. But you know, basically, I'll pass this around. Everyone wants to look at it, but you know, this is something important to have. You got to have a checklist. You got to check it off. You got to do it a few times because if you forget something, you know, you can't run to the store while you're there. Reaching out to colleagues, like you said, just for advice. People that have competed before, people that have been to the place you've been to. Just it's always good to get another viewpoint from people. And then commitment to the hard work. That's the main thing. Because it takes a lot of time to plan, it takes a lot of time to pack. You got to go shopping for your equipment, you got to go shopping for food. So it takes time away from work, it takes time away from your family. So you got to be committed to doing it. If you really want to compete, you got to have, you know, you don't want to forget about work, obviously. You don't want to forget about your family, but you got to be able to balance the three and commit to the hard work. And then being organized is probably the most important thing. One of the guys that I competed with, he had this rolling rack that had everything labeled exactly. You know, this pot is for this dish, this steamer is for this thing. It had like a schematic for everything. It didn't help him win, but it looked really cool.
And it made everyone nervous, including him.
Oh,
He's like, hey, you don't think, no, he can't be that organized, can he? If he's that organized, then something's going to go wrong in this dish, right?
It was very intimidating. But I think the point of that is what it comes down to is you know, the dish that you do and practicing it. That's what it comes down to. And I'm sure Brian said it 1,000 times. I screwed up at the competition because I made my dish too complicated. I didn't practice enough time, and I went overtime. If I had an hour and 5 minutes, I probably would have won, but I didn't.
Some keys to successful plates. So a lot of us always think, some of us have a philosophy when it comes to plating, right? Well, your philosophy may be minimal. So maybe you put crudité in the center of a plate and think that you're going to win this new chef challenge that you just entered, right? Well, if you don't do research on what the judges are looking for and you don't read the rules, then your plate's probably not going to be successful. So some of the key things in successful plates are making sure the flavors work together, making sure that you have textures that are different, right? So everything shouldn't be smooth, right? You should have some crunch. You should have some different elements of temperature as well. And balance. So it needs to be a balanced dish, right? So you can't put a big slodge of cabbage in the center and a very small lamb chop on the plate, right? Balance is not there. Proportion and portion needs to be adequate as well. So for desserts specifically, usually we're looking at about 4 ounces for your main component and much smaller for anything that you're kind of accompanying around that. Focus. When you look at a plate, if you divide it in half and then in quarters, you should be able to, that intersecting line in the center should go through that main component at some point, whether it's off to the side or positioned down a little bit more. It should be focused in the center of the plate. And then the overall presentation should be very clean. So rims of the plates need to be white. A lot of times we're so under the gun that we're throwing things on the last minute and there may be smudge marks from our thumb, or in my case it was green cocoa butter on the edge because I had some on my glove and I had put it under the under rim. Luckily I saw that before I sent it out to the judges. One of the nice things about cleaning the plates is makeup sponges used for foundation, I believe, and a little bit of vinegar takes anything off plates and doesn't leave any streaks. The vinegar, white distilled vinegar, evaporates and leaves a really nice polished look on the outside of the plate.
Yeah, something also very important, doesn't have anything to do with the food really, but serving hot food on hot plates, cold food on cool plates. When I did my the mystery box competition, the last one, Courtney was my helper, by the way. She was awesome. And that's another, going back to that's another important thing. If you do a mystery box competition, you usually get one apprentice, and it's very important to have a great apprentice first of all, but then to use them properly to get your job done. It's essential, because if you don't do that, you're not going to be able to do it by yourself. Anyway, the difference for me between a silver medal and a gold medal was I hadn't done it for a long time, a little bit out of practice, had like a senior moment, and I didn't heat my plates in the oven. So my plates were cold. The food was hot, food was warm, when it left my station, but by the time I got to the judges, it was kind of cold, lukewarm, because I didn't put my plates in the oven, and that was the difference between a silver medal and a gold medal. So something as simple as just heating your plates up, you know, makes that difference. And then on the bottom here, where are we at now? Innovation. Presentation, he talked about refinement. Basically, you don't want to have a sloppy plate, you don't want to have big clunky food, you want to have stuff that makes sense together. And then something I touched on before, you don't want to cook like a traditional dish like a lobster bisque or any other, like a gumbo or anything like that isn't traditional, because most judges, especially older judges, don't like to see you taking liberties with a traditional classical dish. So if you're going to go there right. You know, it might work in your restaurant to do something cool out of the box with something deconstructed or whatever, but for most judges, it's not going to fly with them. Simplicity also, you know, this is my dish for pass that around. Not simple. A lot of different flavors, a lot of different things going on, and kind of learned from that you know, flavor, simplicity is the key to winning a competition. Classical, traditional versus modern, molecular gastronomy. Molecular gastronomy is cool, but its place in culinary competitions maybe a little bit more in pastry, but in mystery box competition or K1 or things like that, maybe do one small component of it, but don't base your whole dish around molecular gastronomy, because the judges aren't going to think it's cool. A lot of them won't get it. It's hard to make it perfect. So you're basically better off staying traditional classical, and if you can throw in one small modern touch to it, probably get a couple extra points, but don't base your whole dish on something modern and molecular. That's all I got about that.
A couple things that I just wanted to share about the judges when they gave me the critique that I thought were pretty nice compliments. The one was, it was really a pleasure to watch you work. It was almost flawless. And I thought, wow. Because in my head, I was like freaking out, like, oh my gosh, the time's ticking, right? It's an hour, and it's an hour of intense, I mean, you are just pumping, right? Every practice I did, I was at 57, 58 minutes, so I was 2 minutes under the gun, right? When I finished the competition, I actually finished 6 minutes before my window. And I was done, and the judges were like, are you done? And I'm like, yes. And then I'm like, crap, do I need to do more stuff? Like, then you start second guessing, and that's when I think a lot of people kind of overshoot and lose that success that they've built. So I was just like, I wiped my hands, and I thought, the judges, it's in their hands, we'll see. And then I was really surprised with the end result of that. But all right, so the cost of competing. So when we went, yeah, our poster child. When we went, we racked up quite a bill when we competed. And we decided to compete as a team because it was much easier. So we had met each other at the Robert Blaine Culinary Salon in January, and a couple ACF meetings in between. But I didn't really know him. And he kind of reached out to me on Facebook and said, hey, would you like to do, travel together as a team for the regional competition? And I thought, yeah, why not? I guess that'll probably be a little less in cost, right? Well, we talked earlier about building camaraderie amongst your colleagues, and that certainly did that with us. 14 hours, 16 hours in an RV across the country. You'll learn a lot about the other person, right? But we laughed, I think, more on that entire trip and just enjoyed the experience and learned so much, I think, about ourselves and what we're capable of. So it was certainly an experience that I think we were both very happy that we did. But it costs money, right? So I'm not a country club chef by any means, so I'm not making 6 figures. But I am an educator, so I make a little bit of money, right? So the little bit of money that I had, we had some sponsorships as well. all that good stuff. The nice thing about competing at the national competition is they actually take care of my expenses for the competition, and you're allowed to have an apprentice. So they provide an apprentice for you, and you don't meet the apprentice until the day of your competition date, okay? Or you can basically bring an apprentice, but it's up to you to front the entire cost. So that's all fine and well if you're a high roller and winning big in Vegas maybe, but I'm not. So we are enlisting fundraising at its finest. So Courtney has helped Chef Rubin on one or two, I'm sorry, I was going to say your first name, and then I'm like, I'm thinking like school, I have to talk about last names, I can't say first names. So she's been competing for a while. She's done several CCAP events and assisted, and I think the future of competing is getting people inspired to become involved in a bigger competition to see what it's about, and who's to say that next year maybe she goes for Student Chef of the Year. Not that I'm putting pressure on you, but that would be a great thing for this association to see at some point, and maybe it's not next year, but maybe it's the year after, right? But as long as you're pushing and driving. So anyways, we set up this, I should say Courtney set up this fund, because we were talking about how we can fundraise quickly. So on GoFundMe, so you can actually log onto the website and you can actually fund whatever amount you want. So if you want to give her $1, you can do that. The nice thing about this is you can actually print whatever it is your transaction is, and you can actually write it off as a tax deduction. So if it's $5, $10, maybe you want to do a little bit of charity work throughout the year, we would love to have your support, especially from the chapter, and we appreciate any amount. So I'm just going to throw that out there as well.
Well, practicing what you have us preach. So today's in our raffle today, which of course the prizes were brought on board by Nestle. We so far made $186 for Courtney to get started on her deal. And of course, we'd love anybody else to feel free to go on the website, or if you need any help with the website, to please reach out to Russ, because what I'm hearing between the lines here, you know, calling a competition is tough, and Chris didn't say who he's competed against. There's some humongous name folks. So, in fact, some of his mentors, I believe, one of
His ex-wife.
his ex-wife. So,
And his words were, good luck.
huge monumental hill to climb. So, if he could come with the apprentice that's practiced with him, figure this out, right, working the angles, much better. We need her to go help him win.
Yeah.
Okay? So feel free, anybody, to do a donation online, or see me, or Leonard, or Chris. We need to get Courtney to Kansas City. I, of course, have already volunteered to feed her a little bit, but we got to get her there. So, because I do have an expense account once we get there. So please help on this area. Thanks, Leonard. Anything else on your presentation
No, I
today?
think that's it.
Because we're
Thank
about
you
there.
guys. Oh, do you guys have any questions? I think everybody's ready for dinner, but.
Anybody have
Okay.
any questions?
All right, I'm going to try to get done because I'm getting a little tired.